My children left me in the nursing home, but a stranger appeared the next day, and what he brought would change everything forever. The car door closed with a dry thud that echoed in the stillness of the morning. My children did not look back. I saw their silhouettes through the tinted glass of the silver sedan, shrinking into smaller and smaller dots on the strip of asphalt that wound between the green hills. I stood there on the cracked concrete sidewalk, my small brown suitcase in my trembling hands. 72 years of life reduced to a single piece of luggage. The air of the nursing home, Harmony Gardens, had a peculiar smell, a mixture of cheap disinfectant, overcooked food, and something deeper, harder to name. It was the odor of time that had stopped, of waiting without purpose. The receptionist handed me a plastic badge with my name and room number on it, 307. Helen Mitchell. As if I could forget who I was. The first 3 days were an exercise in systematic erasure. Wake up at 6:30 for medications that left a bitter film in my mouth. Breakfast at 7:15 in the dining room, lit by fluorescent tubes that highlighted every wrinkle, every age spot. The other residents, women whose names I did not yet know, chewed in silence, their glassy eyes fixed on nothing in particular. We were ghosts sharing a meal. My room was too small to contain memories and too large for solitude. A hospital bed, a plastic chair, a wardrobe that smelled of mothballs. I placed a single photo on the bedside table, me with my children when they were little, on the beach in Cape Cod, in a summer that felt as if it had happened in another life. They were smiling at the camera, innocent of the future that was waiting for us. On the third day, they came. My children. Michael, the oldest, with his executive suit that looked like armor, and Sarah, her eyes avoiding mine. They brought flowers. Yellow roses that clashed brutally with the dim light of the room. "How are you adjusting, Mother?" Michael asked, but his question sounded like an item on a corporate checklist. We sat on the small balcony that overlooked the inner garden, a perfect square of artificial grass bordered by plastic begonias. The afternoon sun cast long shadows that looked like thin fingers reaching across the concrete. It was Sarah who said the words. Her voice trembled slightly, as if she herself did not believe what she was saying. "Mother, we need to talk about the future." Michael finished the thought, his fingers drumming on the metal table. "The nursing home has costs, you know. And with your grandchildren's college expenses." I heard them, but I did not hear them. My eyes were fixed on a sparrow perched on the fence. It pecked at something invisible in the air, its movements quick and determined. While my children spoke of numbers, of plans, of practical realities, I watched the bird in its absolute freedom. So we thought it was better to be honest. Michael continued. "This is not a temporary stay, Mother. It is a permanent move." The words did not hit me like a punch, but like a slow tide that rises little by little, flooding everything in its path. Permanent. The word echoed in my mind while I watched Sarah open her purse and take out some documents. "We need you to sign here," she said, still avoiding my eyes. "These are just the home's formalities." My hand trembled when I picked up the pen. The signature came out shaky, different from the firm handwriting I had had for 70 years. It was as if I were signing my own emotional death certificate. They stayed for 20 more minutes. Empty conversation about the weather, about the grandchildren, about things that no longer mattered. When they stood up to leave, Michael hugged me too quickly, his expensive cologne a passing cloud. Sarah kissed my forehead, her lips cold as marble. "We love you, Mother," they said in unison, as if rehearsed. And then they were gone. I heard their footsteps echoing down the hallway, fading until they became silence. The elevator door groaned as it closed. I remained sitting on the balcony, watching the sparrow that was still there, now singing a song I could not understand. The sun began to set, painting the sky orange and purple. The nursing home lights flicked on automatically, bathing everything in an artificial glow that did not warm. I picked up the photo from the bedside table, my smiling children on the beach, and placed it face down. Not out of anger, but because I could not bear the irony anymore. That night, lying on the hard bed, I listened to the sounds of the home, a dry cough coming from the next room, the squeak of the medication cartwheels, the muffled crying of someone who, like me, had just discovered that being old means being forgotten. But then something strange happened. While I stared at the stained ceiling, a sensation began to rise inside me. It was not hope. It was something more primitive. It was curiosity. A question I did not yet know how to formulate began to take shape in the shadows of the room. And the next day, when my door opened and a man I had never seen before stepped in with a hesitant smile and a worn brown folder in his hands, I knew, with a certainty that came from the depths of my forgotten soul, that nothing would be the same again. What began as just another day of scheduled loneliness became the moment when a complete stranger saw me as a person, not as a patient. Morning arrived with the same relentless routine. The wake-up call at 6:30, the metallic taste of pills, the watery coffee in the silent dining room. But something was different that day. A subtle expectation hovered in the air, like the scent of rain before a storm. My eyes drifted to the door far more often than I cared to admit. When he finally appeared, it was almost an anticlimax. A middle-aged man, wearing a simple coat and carrying a worn leather folder. His graying hair was tousled, as if he had been running against the wind. But it was his eyes that caught me. They held a deep sadness I recognized instantly. It was the same sadness I saw in the mirror every morning. "Good morning, Helen," he said, and his voice was gentle, without the fake cheerfulness the staff used with us. "My name is David. May I sit down?" I nodded, my hands still trembling slightly. He pulled the plastic chair closer and sat, not in the distant position of visitors, but leaning forward, as if we were sharing a secret. "I came because," he began, then paused, searching for the right words. "My mother was here. At Harmony Gardens. She passed away 3 months ago." The air between us shifted. It was no longer the formal relationship between visitor and resident, but something deeper, more human. Two strangers connected by a shared loss. "She was in room 412, he continued, his fingers tracing invisible patterns on the folder. "She liked to sit exactly where you are sitting now. She said it was the only place where the morning sun reached her properly." A memory surfaced, the fragile woman who had occupied this chair before me. I remembered her timid smile, the way she whispered good morning almost inaudibly. "What was her name?" I asked, my own voice sounding stronger than I expected. "Eleanor," he replied, and the name hung in the air between us like a blessing. Eleanor Margaret Jones. She loved coffee with a touch of cinnamon and listening to Sinatra on Sunday mornings. Something inside me loosened. Not the dramatic tears one expects in moments like that, but a quiet thaw, like ice under the spring sun. He was not there out of obligation or pity. He was there because he needed to close a circle, because his own pain needed witnesses. David opened the folder and took out a simple notebook. My mother, she liked to write. Small observations about the day, about the people she met here. He turned the pages with reverent care. She wrote about you. My heart stopped for a second. About me? Yes. His eyes met mine. She described you as the woman with the poet's eyes. She said you had a particular way of observing the world, as if you were always translating reality into a secret language. The words hit me with a force I did not expect. During all those months in the nursing home, I had felt invisible, one shadow among many. And now I discovered that someone had seen me. Truly seen me. What else did she write? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. David smiled, the first genuine smile I had seen since my children left me there. She wrote that you have the habit of counting the sparrows that land on the fence in the morning. That your favorite coffee is from the cafe on the corner, not the one they serve here. That you were a literature teacher before this. Each revelation was like a thread weaving a bridge between us. He was not defining me by my age or my condition, but by the small habits that made me who I was. I brought something for you, he said, pulling a small package wrapped in brown paper from the folder. From the cafe on the corner. My mother liked to bring it to the people she knew here. I unwrapped the package with trembling hands. Inside was a still warm croissant and a small cup of coffee with the unmistakable smell of the cafe I loved so much. It was not the gesture itself that moved me, but the intention behind it, the desire to see me not as a patient who needed to be cared for, but as a person with preferences, memories, a past. As we drank coffee together, he politely refused when I offered to share the food. We talked. Not about illnesses or treatments, but about books we loved, about songs that had marked our lives, about the smell of rain on hot asphalt. We spoke as two people who recognized each other as complete human beings, not as categories. When he stood up to leave, promising to return the following week, something fundamental had shifted inside me. The loneliness was still there, of course. It is a companion that does not leave easily. But now there was a crack of light, a possibility. David did not save me that day. He did not rescue me from the nursing home or give me my family back. But he gave me something far more precious, the feeling that I was still visible, that my existence still mattered to someone. And as the door closed behind him, carrying with it the scent of coffee and shared humanity, I knew that this fragile connection, born from the pain of two strangers, was the beginning of something no nursing home protocol could predict or control. But our connection drew the attention of the administration, and rules written to protect began to pull us apart. The change was subtle at first, almost imperceptible, like the first frost of autumn. On the following Tuesday, when David was supposed to return, I found a new employee at the reception desk, a young woman with a professional smile that did not reach her eyes. Her badge read Head Nurse Thompson. "Good morning, Helen," she said in an excessively sweet voice that sounded like an alarm. "We need to update some information in your file. Could you come with me, please?" Her office was tiny and immaculately organized, every object in its place like soldiers on parade. On the wall, a framed board displayed the nursing home rules with military precision. She offered me the chair opposite her desk, positioning herself like a judge facing the accused. "Helen, we understand that you have been receiving visits from a man named David Jones," she began, her fingers tapping lightly on the computer keyboard. "Could you tell me about that relationship?" The question sounded like an accusation disguised as concern. I explained about his mother, about the visits, about the coffee and the conversations. As I spoke, I watched her eyes skim my face, searching for signs I myself did not know. "You see, Helen," she said, closing the laptop with a soft click, "we have very specific protocols regarding non-family visitors. These rules exist to protect you, the residents. David is not on your approved contact list." The word approved echoed in the small room, as if my ability to choose whom to talk to had expired along with my independence. "But he is a friend," I tried to explain, feeling as if I were defending something fundamentally mine. Nurse Thompson smiled, a calculated movement of the lips that did not convey warmth. "I understand. But friendships need to follow certain procedures. We need documentation, background checks, authorizations. It is for everyone's safety." Safety. The word was repeated like a mantra, but it sounded like a prison. As I left her office, I felt the weight of invisible rules closing around me like a web. On Thursday, David showed up as promised. He brought not only coffee, but a small book of poems his mother had loved. I saw him through the glass door of reception, talking to Nurse Thompson. His face, once open and warm, gradually grew more tense. His hands gestured as he spoke, his shoulders bending under the weight of some explanation I could not hear. When they finally allowed me to meet him in the common area, he looked different. Older, more tired. "Helen, there's a problem," he said, his voice low enough for only me to hear. "They are questioning my visits. They say I need formal authorization from your family." The room around us seemed to shrink. The other residents watched us with lukewarm curiosity, their bodies hunched over magazines they were not reading. Even the air conditioning seemed to whisper warnings. "My family," I began, but the words died in my throat. How could I explain that my children had abandoned me here like an old piece of furniture that no longer fit in the new house? David tried to smile, but it was a sad effort. "I will sort this out. I will speak to the administration, get the necessary authorizations. Do not worry." But I did worry. I worried as I watched him leave, his figure receding down the corridor like a dream dissipating at daybreak. I worried when Nurse Thompson passed by me with a nod that felt more like a sentence than a greeting. In the following days, the atmosphere in the nursing home shifted. Staff members who had once greeted me with familiarity now avoided my eyes. Conversations in the dining room stopped when I approached. It was as if I had contracted a contagious disease, the disease of unauthorized connection. On Monday, when David was supposed to return, I received a different kind of visit. Two men in suits, one from the home's administration and another who introduced himself as a compliance consultant. Their words were polished, their explanations logical, but behind them there was a clear message: I was causing trouble. "We understand that Mr. Jones brings you comfort." "Helen," said the consultant, his glasses catching the light in a way that hid his eyes, "but we need to consider the collective well-being. The rules exist for important reasons." They spoke of legal responsibility, of safety protocols, of the need to maintain a controlled environment. Each word was a brick in the wall being built between David and me. When they left, I sat alone on the balcony, watching the same sparrow from weeks before. It still sang its indifferent song, still pecked at invisible things in the air. And I, for the first time since I arrived at the home, felt an emotion that was not sadness or resignation. It was anger. A quiet, deep anger that burned like coal beneath ashes. Not anger at David, or at Nurse Thompson, or even at my children. It was anger at a system that, in the name of protection, was stealing the last thing I had left, the right to choose with whom to share my limited time. And in that moment, looking at the free sparrow on the fence, I knew I had a choice to make. I could accept the rules, bend to the system, become the model resident they wanted me to be. Or I could remember that before I was a number in room 307. I was Helen Mitchell, teacher, reader, lover of coffee with cinnamon and conversations that were worth having. And Helen Mitchell was not ready to ask permission to exist. Faced with rules that separated us, I had to choose between the safety of obedience and the risk of being seen as human. The night that followed the visit from the men in suits was the longest of my life. Lying on the hard bed, watching the shadows dance on the ceiling, I felt the weight of the decision piling up in my chest like stones. Each beat of my heart seemed to echo the same question: obey or resist. In the morning, as the sun rose shyly behind the hills, I watched the other residents in the dining room. They chewed their food with mechanical movements, their eyes empty of any inner fire. They were ghosts who had accepted their condition, who had traded their humanity for the peace of submission. And I wondered if that would be my fate, to become just another shadow among shadows. I went back to my room and sat in the balcony chair, the same chair where David and I had shared coffee and stories. I looked at my hands, protruding veins, transparent skin, age spots that told the story of 72 years. These hands had held books, caressed children, written love letters. Now they trembled at the thought of picking up a pen to challenge a system. The choice was not simple. On one side was the predictable safety of obedience. Follow the rules, accept my place, become the model resident who did not cause trouble. There was a certain comfort in that option, the comfort of surrender, of peaceful acceptance of the inevitable. On the other side was the terrifying risk of authenticity. Writing that letter, challenging the rules, asserting my right to choose my own connections. The price would be high: isolation, possibly transfer to a more restrictive ward, the loss of the little control I still had over my routine. My mind wandered back to the years when I taught literature. I remembered teaching my students about Antigone, about her choice to bury her brother against the laws of the state. Sometimes, I would tell those young, idealistic faces, obedience to the unwritten laws of the heart is more important than submission to the written laws of men. The irony hit me like a punch. Here I was, 72 years later, facing the same choice I had discussed so easily in my classroom. Theory had become reality, and reality was far more frightening than any academic debate. I took out a pad of paper I kept in the drawer, yellowed sheets that had survived my move into the home. The pen trembled in my hand, not from physical weakness, but from the weight of what I was about to do. The first words came out hesitant, as if testing the ground. I wrote about loneliness, about the emptiness of being treated as a problem to be managed instead of a person to be understood. I wrote about David, not as a problematic visitor, but as a human being who saw me as an equal. As the words flowed, something inside me shifted. The quiet anger that had been fermenting in recent weeks turned into determination. It was no longer about David or about the visits. It was about something far more fundamental. It was about the right of every human being, no matter their age or condition, to choose with whom to share their final days. I wrote about the small gestures that make us human, the favorite coffee, the beloved book, the music that brings memories flooding back. I wrote about how these small things were more important than any safety protocol. When I finished, there were 3 pages filled with my shaky but firm handwriting. It was not a letter of protest or rebellion, it was a testimony. A record that, even in the twilight of life, there is still light, still choice, still humanity. I folded the pages carefully and placed them in an envelope. I did not address it to anyone in particular. It would be a message cast into the bureaucratic sea, in the hope that it would reach someone who still remembered what it meant to be human. As I placed the envelope on the table, I felt a strange mixture of fear and release. The fear was real. I knew the consequences that could come. But the release was deeper. It was the feeling of having taken back, even for a moment, control over my own story. And in that instant, looking at the simple envelope that held my quiet revolution, I understood that the real choice had never been between safety and risk. The real choice was between existing as a number or living as a person. And Helen Mitchell had chosen to live. My choice cost me the little control I still had over my days, and I found myself more alone than ever. The consequences did not arrive with a crash, but with the calculated silence of those who know exactly how to break a spirit. The morning after I delivered the letter, I woke to find my door locked from the outside. It was not a dramatic imprisonment with visible padlocks, but something more insidious, an electronic mechanism that emitted a soft click whenever someone approached. Nurse Thompson appeared with my breakfast, her face a mask of professional concern. She explained that it was a temporary safety measure, that they needed to observe me more closely after my episode of agitation. Her words were soft as velvet, but they cut like blades. My personal belongings began to disappear gradually. First the photo of my children on the beach, then my books, finally even the pen I used to write. The room became a white, empty cell, without memories, without personality, without history. It was as if they were methodically erasing every trace that Helen Mitchell had ever existed. Staff visits turned into clinical routines. They would come in, perform their checks, and leave. No eye contact beyond what was strictly necessary, no words beyond what was professional. I was a case to be managed, a problem to be contained. The loneliness that had once been emotional became physical, tangible, like a weight sinking into my bones. The days blurred into an indistinct haze of blood pressure readings, meals delivered on plastic trays, and the constant sound of the electronic door locking and unlocking. I lost track of time, of space, even of who I was. Memories that had once been vivid began to fade, like old photographs left too long in the sun. The night of the 5th day was my lowest point. I woke in the middle of the night with a tightness in my chest that was not physical, but existential. I looked around the white, empty room and could not remember why I was there, who I was, what had brought me to that place. The darkness outside the window seemed to have invaded my mind, erasing everything in its path. I sat up in bed, my hands trembling not from cold, but from a deep, primal terror. It was the fear of total erasure, of final disappearance. Not physical death, that I accepted as a natural part of life, but the death of identity, of memory, of the very essence of what it meant to be me. I vaguely remember David, his visits, the coffee with cinnamon, the conversations about books. But those memories felt like distant dreams, stories someone had told me about another person. The letter I had written with such conviction now seemed like an act of madness, the last desperate attempt of someone who refused to accept reality. I looked at my empty hands on the white blanket and could not recognize them. Had these hands held books? Written letters? Caressed beloved faces? It all seemed to have happened to someone else, in another life. The darkness inside me grew, swallowing pieces of who I was. I began to doubt everything, my memories, my feelings, even my own existence. Perhaps I had never been Helen Mitchell, literature teacher, mother, lover of coffee and conversation. Perhaps I had always been only this, a body in a white room, waiting for the end. That night, for the first time since I arrived at the nursing home, I truly wished for everything to end. Not out of dramatic despair, but from a deep weariness that seeped into every cell of my being. The weariness of fighting, of remembering, of trying to keep alive a flame the world seemed determined to extinguish. I lay on my back, staring at the white ceiling that reflected the faint light from the corridor. I closed my eyes and let the darkness envelop me completely. It was time to give up, to accept my fate, to finally become what they wanted me to be, a number, a case, a resolved problem. And in the moment when I surrendered completely to the darkness, something strange happened. A memory surfaced, not like a dramatic flash, but like a weak ember beneath ashes. It was my grandmother's voice, more than 60 years earlier, singing a lullaby in a language I did not understand, but whose melody still echoed somewhere deep in my soul. And in that instant, at the very bottom of the pit, Helen Mitchell found a reason not to disappear completely. But at the bottom of the pit, I discovered that my letter had escaped the walls that held me, and it had begun to circulate among hands that still believed in humanity. The memory of my grandmother's lullaby did not save me immediately. It simply opened a small crack in the darkness, an almost imperceptible point of light. For hours, I lay in bed, letting that forgotten melody echo in my mind, like a thin thread connecting me to a self I had almost lost. Morning came with its relentless routine. The electronic lock clicked open, the nurse from the morning shift entered with my breakfast tray. But something was different that day. Her movements were less mechanical, her eyes met mine for a fraction of a second longer than necessary. When she left, she did not close the door completely. She left it slightly ajar. Minutes later, I heard low voices in the corridor. Not the professional tones of the staff, but urgent whispers, almost conspiratorial. One of them was familiar. It belonged to Maria, the cleaner who always hummed old songs while she worked. The door opened fully and Maria stepped in, her face marked by an expression I had never seen on her before, a mixture of fear and determination. In her hands, she held a few crumpled sheets of paper. My sheets. My letter. "Miss Helen," she whispered, closing the door behind her. "Someone put this in the trash in the break room." I read it. Her eyes were full of tears, not of pity, but of recognition. She came closer to the bed and placed the pages in my trembling hands. "My mother is in a place like this," she went on, her voice heavy with contained emotion. "And I am afraid every day that one day she will write a letter like this." As she spoke, other voices joined hers outside the door. They were other staff members, the cook who always gave me an extra portion of dessert, the young man who delivered medications and always told me terrible jokes. Their faces appeared at the gap in the door, their eyes full of silent solidarity. Maria explained in a low, quick voice. My letter had been found by accident when someone emptied the bin in Nurse Thompson's office. Instead of being destroyed, it had begun circulating among the lower-level employees, the ones who actually spent time with the residents, who knew them as people, not as cases. Each person who read the letter identified with some part of it. The cook remembered his grandmother, who had adored a specific kind of tea. The young man with the medications thought of his father, who was beginning to show the same kind of loneliness I had described. Maria saw her own mother in every word. They were not rebelling against the system. They were reaffirming their shared humanity. Quietly, they began to carry out small acts of resistance. A cup of coffee from a specific cafe left in my room when no one was looking. A book hidden beneath my pillow. A meaningful nod when our eyes met in the corridor. Those small acts of silent rebellion accumulated, creating an underground network of solidarity that the nursing home rules could not control. Staff began to communicate through gestures and glances, forming their own secret language of resistance. That afternoon, something fundamental changed inside me. The darkness that had swallowed me began to recede, not because of a heroic act, but through the simple understanding that I was not alone. My letter was no longer just my words. It had become the voice of all those who felt, but could not express, the pain of being treated as less than human. I got out of bed, my legs trembling but determined. I walked to the window and looked out at the garden. The same sparrow was still there, but that day it was not singing alone. Other birds had joined it, creating a chorus that filled the air with life. I picked up the crumpled pages of my letter and smoothed them out on the table. Each word, written in a moment of absolute despair, now seemed charged with new meaning. They were no longer a solitary cry in the dark, but a call that had found an answer. And in that moment, looking at the hopeful faces of the staff who were risking their jobs for a gesture of humanity, I understood that true turning points never come from grand actions or dramatic speeches. They come from the simple act of one person recognizing the humanity in another, and from that small spark creating a chain that no system, no matter how rigid, can completely extinguish. Helen Mitchell was not only alive. She had found her tribe. The final confrontation revealed not only that one person can change a system, but that dignity is contagious when someone decides to stop asking permission to exist. Change did not arrive with fanfare or dramatic announcements. It slid into Harmony Gardens the way morning light slips through the blinds, gentle, inevitable, transforming everything it touched. It began with small, almost imperceptible adjustments. Residents began to be called by their names instead of their room numbers. Visiting hours were relaxed. Even the dining room menu gained options based on individual preferences. Nurse Thompson was transferred to another unit. They said it was a promotion, but we all knew the truth. Her management style, based on control and rigid protocols, no longer fit the new spirit that had taken hold of the home. David returned 1 week after the changes began. He no longer needed special authorizations or justifications. He simply appeared at my door, bringing not only coffee from the corner cafe, but also a small new notebook and a pen. "It seems your words found ears that were ready to listen," he said, his smile more genuine than I had ever seen. We sat on the balcony, the same place where everything had begun. The garden below was no longer just a square of artificial grass. The staff had planted real flowers, and some of the more able residents helped with the gardening. The air carried the sweet fragrance of jasmine instead of the harsh scent of disinfectant. My children appeared a few weeks later. They came not out of obligation, but out of something that looked very like genuine remorse. Michael brought old photographs I had not seen in years, images of family parties, vacations, moments that had been lost in the rush of adult life. Sarah, with tears in her eyes, asked for forgiveness, not with grand words, but with the simple act of sitting beside me and listening, truly listening, when I spoke about my days. Forgiveness did not come easily, but it came. Not as a gift I gave them, but as an understanding that rose naturally, that all of us, at different moments, fail to see the humanity in those we love, especially when that humanity becomes inconvenient or challenging. The true legacy of my letter, however, was not the reconciliation with my family or even the reforms in the nursing home. It was the program born from the ashes of that conflict. Voices of the Twilight, an initiative where residents could share their stories, their knowledge, their life experiences with community volunteers. I became the first volunteer teacher, giving small literature classes to anyone who wanted to listen. My classroom was the balcony, my students a mixture of residents, staff, and visitors. We taught not only books, but the art of listening, of seeing, of recognizing humanity in every face, no matter how many wrinkles time had carved there. David became a regular visitor, not only for me, but for several residents. He brought not only coffee and conversation, but a genuine attention that became a medicine far more powerful than any pill. In my last Voices of the Twilight session, something extraordinary happened. Nurse Thompson, whom I had not seen since her transfer, appeared at the door. She no longer wore her impeccable uniform, but simple, almost casual clothes. Her eyes, once always calculating, were now soft, vulnerable. "I came to apologize," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "And to learn." She sat among the other listeners, not as an authority, but as an equal. And at that moment, I understood that true transformation does not happen when we defeat our opponents, but when we turn them into allies through example. Autumn arrived, painting the hills around the nursing home in shades of gold and red. Sitting on the balcony, watching the same sparrow that had witnessed my journey from the beginning, I felt a deep peace that did not come from resignation, but from understanding. Helen Mitchell had not defeated the system. She had remembered that she was larger than anything the system could contain. And in that remembrance, she had not only reclaimed her own dignity, she had helped others reclaim theirs. The letter she had written in a moment of absolute despair had not changed the world, but it had changed a small corner of it. And sometimes, a small corner is all we need to remind us that no matter how old we are, no matter how many losses we have endured, we will always be more than the sum of our circumstances. We will always be, in our deepest essence, human. And that, I discovered, is the only victory that truly matters.